Welcome in to YCN Sports Talk. I'm Jeremy Stout along with Dave Collins. And Dave, another week, World Series is underway. We've got a lot of football to talk about, a lot of baseball. Cleveland Indians getting their first win, or getting the win in Game 1 of the World Series. So we'll get right into that. How much of an edge do the Indians have now, or was it status quo, Game 1, home field advantage, their best pitcher? They needed to win that game.
Just from what's been going on this season, Jeremy, it seems like Cleveland has flown under the radar. They had a bunch of injuries. People sort of wrote them off at the All-Star break. But right now, they're playing the best baseball. They have the best pitching front to back.
Right. Can't forget about that bullpen.
Cubs have great pitching, too. Bullpen may be a little bit suspect right now. Cleveland, I think, winning the first game at home in front of those fans and possibly winning Game 2 tonight or maybe tomorrow, weather permitting.
Right.
It's going to put the Cubs under the gun. The one good thing that is different about the World Series than the rest of the series that have been played so far is that it's a 2-3-2 format. So Cleveland had last night. They're going to have Game 2, then 3 in a row at Wrigley Field in Chicago. Maybe the Cubs can get back into it. Then the final 2 games, if necessary, 6 and 7, are back in Cleveland.
And you bring that up, and that's a good point, that 3 games in a row, and we'll see how Terry Francona can respond to that with his bullpen having to pitch 3 straight days, which he hasn't had to do yet in the playoffs. And not to discount anything, you saw Andrew Miller pitch 40-something pitches last night.
Yep.
But how will that bullpen respond having to be called possibly 3 times in a row?
And, of course, we're taping this on a Wednesday afternoon, so it's all weather permitting tonight with Game 2. But that did come into effect. You remember a couple of shows ago I talked about what would happen with rain delays and rainouts with that Washington Dodgers series, too. That had a little bit to do with it as well. I'll tell you what, though, just watching the pitching, and I'm not sure if it's camera angles or sound effects, these pitchers, these starting pitchers for both teams, you've got Hendricks coming up, scheduled to pitch Game 3 for the Cubs. You have the Cleveland starting pitcher. Their stuff just looks like it's nasty. You don't even want to be in the batter's box.
Yeah, and okay, so getting into that pitching, obviously the Cubs have the advantage in starting pitching. But are we going to fall into the same trap this year or this next 6 games that the Indians have no shot and the Cubs are overwhelming favorites? Or, as you said, will they be able to neutralize some of that stuff with that bullpen?
I'm still looking, a couple days ago when they announced the rotations, I'm still looking for Kyle Hendricks to see what he can do. He's going to get the ball for the first World Series game, Game 3 in Wrigley Field. That's huge pressure. We know he's he's from California, but went to Dartmouth, did wonderful things under head coach Bob Whalen at Dartmouth. The pressure's going to be on him. Let's see how he responds, and that could tell the tale for the rest of the series, the way the Cubs go.
All right, going into this season, I said the Cubs, if they make it to the World Series, we can call their season a success. Obviously, they want to win the World Series, but when you get to the World Series, anything can happen. So, that being said, Cubs look like they're set up for the long haul. If they do not win this series, is it a disappointment, or is it one of those things where they played as well as they could and they just lost to a good team?
I think you have to be satisfied if you're a Cubs fan that you actually, you made it to the World Series.
Right.
You're there. You've got Joe Madden. He's been to the World Series before with Tampa Bay back in 2008 when they lost to the Phillies. That was a crazy series as well. I think one of the games got snowed out or suspended. He knows what he's doing. I give Joe Madden a couple extra years. If the Cubs can, as long as they don't get swept, this is a successful season for Chicago.
They need to win a couple games.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, now for the Indians side, it looks like this Indians team isn't as set up for the future as the Cubs team just because of the pieces
They
and parts,
just need one.
But they just have the pieces. They win one World Series, and that's enough.
I think so. You can't ask for dynasties anymore because of free agencies, because of trades, and also because of injuries. Those are the 3 main factors. That's why, New England's held on to it for 15 years. We're talking football now. Baseball, I think you're going to see the last of dynasties come with the Yankees. That was back in the late 90s and the 2000s.
Okay, we're here on Wednesday. As you mentioned, the game was moved up, Game 2 to 7 p.m., so hopefully after you finish watching us, you'll tune over to that. What do we have for predictions for the rest of the series? Because when we come back next week, it may be over, or we may be getting a Game 7 next Wednesday.
I'd love to see a walk-off Game 7 base hit for the Cleveland Indians. I mean, as much as I want Chicago to win, and I used to watch Cubs games on WGN way back in the day, Terry Francona, he's still been an idol of mine for the past 15 years, even when he was with the Philadelphia Phillies.
Yep.
So I'm going to say Indians in 7 games.
All right, I'm going to agree with you. Say Indians in 7 games. We'll be back here next Wednesday talking about Game 7 and what will happen in that game. Corey Kluber, he could pitch on 3 days rest in Game 4. He could come back in Game 7.
Hendricks could come back for the Cubs.
Exactly. And that bullpen, they'll have all hands on deck. So Game 7 winner for Cleveland. We'll be back with that maybe next week if they're still playing. But we're going to take a break right now, and we'll get back to your Jets when we come back.
Why?
Mr. Ryan Fitzpatrick had some interesting comments. We'll break those down when we come back. YCN Sports Talk.